Oakhaven was a village shrouded in whispers. The air was thick with secrets, and the fog that rolled in every evening seemed to carry the weight of countless untold stories. Ancient whispers passed down through generations, spoke of things that lurked in the shadows, unseen but always felt. They spoke of a malevolent spirit, the Mirror Man, a figure of dread and mystery. He was said to be trapped within a mirror, forever yearning for freedom, his presence a constant, silent plea for release. The villagers believed him to be nothing more than a scary story, a figment of overactive imaginations. A tale to keep children in line, to make them behave and stay away from the old abandoned places.
But I, a young girl with a thirst for adventure, couldn't shake off the unease that settled in my heart whenever the Mirror Man was mentioned. The stories, though dismissed by the adults, held a strange power over me.
One humid afternoon, Lily found herself in the attic, a place she had always been curious about but never dared to explore alone. Dust swirled in the air, dancing in the beams of sunlight that pierced through the cracks in the wooden walls, creating an almost magical atmosphere. She stumbled upon an ornately carved silver-backed mirror hidden beneath a dusty sheet, its presence both alluring and intimidating. Intrigued, Lily reached out and pulled the sheet away, revealing the mirror's gleaming surface, which seemed to shimmer with a life of its own. As she gazed into her reflection, an inexplicable urge to touch it washed over her, a compulsion she couldn't resist. Driven by a force she couldn't comprehend, Lily's fingers traced the smooth, cool surface of the mirror, feeling a strange connection to it.
Suddenly, the attic seemed to grow colder, the air thick with an unseen presence. It was as if the very atmosphere had shifted, becoming heavy and oppressive. My breath hitched in my throat, a sense of dread washing over me. The reflection staring back at me was no longer my own. It was a face twisted with malice, eyes burning with an unnatural light. A pair of glowing, malevolent eyes pierced through the silvered glass, sending a shiver down my spine, freezing me in place.
Before she could react, the mirror slipped from her grasp, her fingers numb with fear. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the attic, sharp and deafening, breaking the eerie silence. As Lily stared at the scattered shards, a cold dread washed over her, realizing the gravity of what had just happened. The whispers, once distant, now seemed to swirl around her, taunting her with the knowledge of what she had done, growing louder and more insistent. The Mirror Man was free. The air grew colder still, and the shadows seemed to deepen, as if welcoming their long-lost master back into the world.
That night, sleep offered no escape for me. The comfort of my bed felt like a distant memory, replaced by an overwhelming sense of dread that clung to me like a second skin. Vivid nightmares plagued my dreams, each more terrifying than the last. They were not just dreams, but vivid, horrifying experiences that left me gasping for breath, drenched in sweat. I found myself trapped in a labyrinth of mirrors, each reflecting a distorted, grotesque version of myself. The mirrors seemed to stretch endlessly, creating a maze that twisted and turned, leading me deeper into the darkness. The air was thick with an oppressive silence, broken only by the sound of my own ragged breathing and the slow, deliberate tapping of footsteps approaching from the shadows. Each step echoed ominously, sending shivers down my spine. Each time I turned to face the source of the sound, it would vanish, leaving me trembling in the cold, unforgiving reflection of the mirrors. The fear was palpable, a living entity that seemed to feed off my terror.
Then, a chilling laughter would echo through the labyrinth, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was a sound that froze the blood in her veins, a cruel reminder of the malevolent presence that haunted her. It was a cruel, mocking laughter that seeped into her bones, filling her with a primal fear she had never known. The laughter was relentless, a constant reminder that she was never truly alone in the darkness. As the nights went by, the nightmares intensified, seeping into her waking hours. The line between reality and nightmare blurred, leaving her in a perpetual state of fear and confusion. Lily began seeing fleeting glimpses of the Mirror Man lurking in the periphery of her vision, gone as quickly as they appeared. These sightings were brief but left a lasting impression, a constant reminder of the terror that awaited her. His reflection would flash in windows, in puddles, even in the gleaming silverware at dinner. No place was safe from his haunting presence, and every reflective surface became a portal to her nightmares. Each glimpse sent a jolt of terror through her, a constant reminder of the evil she had unleashed. The fear was unrelenting, a shadow that followed her every move, never allowing her a moment of peace.
I felt a growing sense of dread, a certainty that something truly horrifying was about to happen. The anticipation of the unknown was almost as terrifying as the nightmares themselves. But I was trapped in a prison of my own fear, unable to confide in anyone about the nightmares, the glimpses, the overwhelming sense of impending doom. The isolation was suffocating, and the weight of my fear grew heavier with each passing day. The whispers of Oakhaven had become my reality, and I was living through a nightmare I couldn't escape. The once peaceful village now seemed shrouded in an eerie fog, its familiar streets transformed into a labyrinth of fear and uncertainty. Every corner of Oakhaven held a new terror, every shadow a potential threat. The village that had once been my home now felt like a prison, its walls closing in around me as the nightmares continued to haunt my every step. I clung to the hope that this was all just a bad dream, that I would wake up and find myself free from this torment. But deep down, I knew that the nightmare was far from over, and the true horror was yet to come. One night I woke with a gasp. My heart pounded in my chest, and I could feel the cold sweat trickling down my back. The air was thick with an unexplainable dread. The room was bathed in an eerie silver light. My blood ran cold. It was as if the moon itself had descended into my room, casting everything in a ghostly glow. Standing at the foot of my bed, his form shimmering and indistinct, was the Mirror Man. His presence was both mesmerizing and terrifying, like a nightmare come to life. His eyes, two glowing embers in the darkness, seemed to pierce through my very soul. Terror choked me. I felt as though those eyes could see every secret, every fear I had ever harbored. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body was frozen in place. It was as if an invisible force held me down, rendering me completely helpless.
"You have freed me, child." His voice was a haunting whisper, echoing in the silence of the room. "And now you will help me reclaim what is rightfully mine." His words were a command, not a request, and they filled me with a sense of impending doom.
His laughter, a chilling symphony of broken glass and whispered threats, echoed around the room, each sound a shard of ice piercing Lily's heart. It was a sound that promised pain and suffering, each sound a shard of ice piercing Lily's heart. She could feel her resolve weakening, her fear growing with every passing second.
"What do you want?" My voice was barely a whisper, trembling with fear and desperation.
Lily whispered, her voice trembling. She knew she had to find out what he wanted, even if the answer terrified her. She knew the stories. The Mirror Man fed on fear, on despair. He was a creature of darkness, thriving on the misery of others. She had to be strong. She couldn't let him see her fear, couldn't let him win.
"This village, once mine, will be mine again." His voice was filled with a dark promise, a vow of vengeance. "And you, child, will be my instrument of chaos." His words were a chilling prophecy, a fate she couldn't escape.
He reached out, his hand, as cold and insubstantial as mist, brushing against her cheek. The touch was like a death sentence, cold and final. Lily flinched, the touch sending a wave of icy terror through her. She felt as though her very soul was being touched by darkness. Then, as quickly as he had appeared, the Mirror Man vanished. It was as if he had never been there, leaving only the memory of his chilling presence. The silver light faded, leaving Lily trembling in the darkness. She was alone again, but the fear remained, a lingering shadow in her mind. The encounter was brief, but the terror it instilled was profound. It was a fear that would haunt her for the rest of her days. She was trapped in a nightmare of her own making, and there seemed to be no escape. The Mirror Man had left his mark, and she knew he would return. The next morning, Lily tried to tell her family about the horrifying encounter, about the nightmares that haunted her every waking moment. But the words seemed to stick in her throat, choked by the fear that clawed at her insides. When she did manage to stammer out a few disjointed sentences about the Mirror Man, her family dismissed it as a bad dream.
It was just a nightmare, sweetheart. The Mirror Man isn't real. It's just an old story.
But even as her mother spoke, Lily saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes, a shadow of fear lurking beneath the surface. But the villagers weren't so lucky. Strange things began happening around Oakhaven. Objects moved on their own, whispers seemed to emanate from empty rooms, and mirrors shattered without reason. A palpable sense of dread settled over the village, a creeping terror that seeped into every corner of their lives.
I knew it was the Mirror Man, his power growing with each passing day. I had to do something to convince my family, to warn the villagers. But how could I make them believe the terrifying truth when I myself was still grappling with the reality of the nightmare I had unleashed?